This video is based on positive externalities in consumption. So when we're looking at positive externalities, we are looking at the third party and we're looking at the consumption of this good benefits the third party, and therefore we want these types of goods to be available and to be consumed. So when we're drawing the diagram, because the demand is the key focus, we're just going to draw the supply curve and we're just going to assume that the marginal social cost equals the marginal private cost. So the marginal private cost is the first and second party, and it just represents the cost of the producers of producing that good. The social cost is the private cost plus the external cost. So the private cost is the first and second party. The external cost is the third party. So what I mean by the third party is those outside of the transaction. So in other words, society. Now, because we are saying that the distortion in the market or the market failure is occurring on the demand side rather than the supply side, we are just simply going to assume that marginal social cost equals marginal private cost, even though in reality it probably doesn't. So, where we've got the marginal private benefit equaling the marginal private cost, that is the free market allocation of such a resource, so at Q1. So the marginal private benefit represents the benefit that consumers receive from consuming the good. And what actually tends to happen with this type of good is it's undervalued, and therefore because it's undervalued, it's often underconsumed. And it's very, very similar to what we see with, for example, merit goods. So merit goods often have these positive externalities. Now, as I've said here, the free market is at Q1. The only issue here is this allocation of the resource is not taking into account the wider effects on society. And therefore, actually, Q1, we would consider it to be underconsumed. So, as we can see here, the marginal social benefit is greater than the marginal private benefit. What does that mean? Well, the social benefit is the private benefit, so those involved in the first and second party, as well as the external benefit, which is the third party. So what we're saying here is it doesn't just benefit the consumer and the producer, but it also benefits the third party, it benefits society, and therefore we want it to be consumed. At Q2, unfortunately, because the marginal private benefit equals the marginal private cost, there is no incentive for producers to produce at a greater volume, because then that would mean that the marginal private cost would be greater than the marginal private benefit. And therefore, as I've mentioned before, it is under-consumed. So we can see this, and this is the market failure, that arrow highlights that at Q1, where's the free market allocation, the external benefits is that arrow pointing up towards the marginal social benefit. It's that difference between the marginal private benefit and the marginal social benefit is the external benefit. So we want it to be at Q2, because remember, Q2 is the socially efficient equilibrium, but unfortunately the market failure exists because it is underconsumed at Q1. So, as I've said here, the deadweight loss is the shaded area, which highlights that the free market allocation is inefficient because the external benefit is greater than the private benefit, and it is not being consumed at Q2. So some of the examples that we saw in that first image is the likes of, let's say, vaccinations, healthy, nutritious foods such as, let's say, fruit and vegetables, schools, those types of examples we would see as having positive externalities.